BattleBit Remastered may look like a simple game, but it's honestly the hottest game on the market right now, and let's be honest here, despite its looks, there's a lot of mechanical depth to get through. How do you heal after taking damage? How do you effectively use an RPG? How do you navigate the chaos of the game in the moment-to-moment gunplay? G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today we are going over everything you need to know to play BattleBit Remastered. So just to be clear, this is of course going to be a video aimed primarily at newer players to the game, but there's also going to be some advanced stuff in here as well, so to my fellow veteran players out there, you may too learn something by sticking around. On top of that, if I miss a tip in this video that's worth highlighting, leave it in the comment section down below. I'm going to have a pinned comment by myself down below that will collate some of my favourite suggestions from the community in there as well for extra reading. But okay, without further ado, let's get into the tips and tricks to playing BattleBit Remastered. Tip number 1, BattleBit Remastered is a squad-based game. While you can run around solo, you won't have access to the majority of the game's classes or squad mates to spawn on closer to a fight. The game should put you into a squad automatically, but if it does not for some reason, make sure you pick a squad from the list that has some space and go from there. Tip number 2, you can spawn on any objective that your team owns if they're uncontested, any squad member if they're outside of combat, your home base, or any vehicles located at your home base. If you see a squad mate's icon grayed out or a control point flashing, it cannot be spawned on. There are some exceptions to these rules depending on the game mode, but those rules underpin the system overall. Tip number 3, after you spawn into the game, you might find yourself getting a bit lost. You can press the M key to bring up the map again to get your bearings. The maps in this game are fairly large, so it's fair to get lost on the first few runs, don't worry. Tip number 4, you can also use the map to work out where the battle on the map may be taking place or where potential enemies may be. The general rule of thumb here being that where your allies are not, enemies will be. It sounds silly, but it works. Tip number 5, one of the biggest challenges I've heard many face in BattleBit is around target identification and picking out friend from foe. All soldiers in the game have coloured markers on their person to help identify them. Blue colouring will represent an ally, green colouring a squad member, and red an enemy. It may take a while to get used to, but eventually it will feel like second nature. Tip number 6, classes. This will be one of the first decisions you need to make when spawning in for the first time. If you're familiar with Battlefield, these classes will sound fairly similar, but here's a quick rundown of each class in the game for clarity's sake. The Assault class is as standard as they come, rocking assault rifles, small ammo packs, grapple hooks, and C4. The Assault class also comes with passive buffs to its reload speed, aim down sight speed, and weapon swap times. The Engineer is as usual, responsible for keeping vehicles alive or sending them straight to the Shadow Realm, rocking various RPGs and repair tools. This is the class for all of you budding demolitionists and mechanics out there. The Medic carries additional bandages, can revive allies faster, and is the only class in the game that can actually heal players from damage, more on that later. The Support class rocks high capacity light machine guns and large ammo crates to help resupply allies at a moment's notice, and the Recon class is the in-game sniper. It doesn't get much simpler than that. Tip number 7, BattleBit is a chaotic experience. There's going to be gunfire everywhere and a lot of angles to consider. As you're learning the game, I would recommend starting off as a medic. This will let you focus on keeping allies up and running, learning the flow of the game, and will earn you some good XP while learning how to handle the weaponry and come to grips with the time to kill of the game. Tip number 8, this serves as a good opportunity to talk about the game's 2-stage healing mechanics. If you take hits in BattleBit, now you can use your bandage, which is available to all classes, to stop the bleeding, but that does not constitute as healing in this game, as you'll still be down on HP after the fact. A combat medic must come up to you and use their medical kit to actually get you back up to full health. As a medic, you'll see the status of nearby allies on your HUD, including whether they are bleeding or not, so you can prioritize critical patients. Tip number 9, did an ally go down in a bad spot, a doorway perhaps? Fear not, you can drag allies and enemies alike by walking up to them and pressing the F key by default. This will let you move an ally to a safe spot for a revive, or steal an enemy away for some funny proximity chat shenanigans. Tip number 10, you can also begin the bandaging process and start reviving a player while you're dragging them. Getting into this habit will speed up your efficiency as a medic and will really let you keep your allies moving. Tip number 11, as a combat medic, you'll start off with some smoke grenades in your loadout by default. Use these as well to cover your approach to fallen allies and get them back up under some cover where dragging them is not possible. Tip number 12, you can also use smoke grenades offensively to cross open territory. To do this the best way, smoke an enemy's position instead of yours if you can. This will ensure that you're not running blind into enemy fire under the cover of smoke, and rather, you'll be forcing the enemy to blind fire from smoke from their position. Tip number 13. Okay, at this point, we're starting to get an idea for the game's flow. Let's start delving a little deeper. You can customize your character's appearance by clicking on the character menu button below the loadout button. While this may look cosmetic on the surface, these adjustments actually have impacts on how much ammo you can take into battle, how much armor you'll be wearing, and your movement speed. While you're still learning the game, I would recommend taking a media armor class on most kits, as it's a good middle ground for tankiness and mobility. Tip number 14. The support class has access to a unique armor set called the Exo Armor, which almost acts like a juggernaut suit. It's hella fun to run, but you will see yourself moving around the map like a snail, so take care when equipping this armor. Tip number 15. Handling your weapons. BattleBit's weaponry is underpinned by multiple statistics that can be found in the loadout screen that will inform how a weapon will recoil. The key ones to look out for are vertical recoil, how much a weapon will climb vertically, horizontal recoil, how much a weapon will shake left and right in a burst, and the first shot multiplier, which is how much the first shot of every burst is amplified. Take note of these numbers, fire a few burst rounds to get a feel for the kick, and use that information to better control your weapon of choice. Tip number 16, and as a follow-up to this last point, BattleBit also incorporates a cone of fire and bloom mechanic into its game. The longer you hold down a burst, the less accurate your weapon will become. Practice that trigger discipline at range to control your shots and your accuracy. Tip 17. Sometimes it's good to get this testing done in a calmer environment. There's a firing range that you can go to in the game that will leave all items unlocked for you. This is where you can work on those perfect attachment setups, or just get a better feel for the gunplay overall. Tip 18. Reloading and managing your magazine economy is a little different in BattleBit by comparison to other shooters out there. In BattleBit, you don't necessarily have an ammo pool that you draw on per se, but instead, you cycle through magazines as you reload them, of which they will maintain the amount of rounds that you left in them when you come back to them. You'll need to keep track of this to ensure you don't leave yourself with a bunch of half-empty magazines in a hot firefight. Which leads us on to tip number 19. Have you got a bunch of half-empty magazines in your loadout and a moment of downtime? You can hold the P key to combine those magazines into single mags, minimizing your downtime, and is always worth doing when you have a chance. Tip number 20. In order to achieve a speedier reload, you can hold your R key when reloading to drop a magazine onto the ground as opposed to putting it back in your inventory. This does speed up the reload process by a good amount, but you won't be able to resupply that magazine off of an ammo crate unless you pick it back up. You can do this by holding F on the dropped mag. While playing BattleBit, you'll notice that a couple of different hit markers will appear in your firefights. A white hit marker is a standard hit, blue is to indicate you hit someone's body armor, and red represents a kill. You can also change your settings to give headshots a certain hit marker color as well, like I've done so as well. Tip 22. I know this sounds stupidly obvious, but once you start dialing in on that weapon handling expertise, start going for headshots. With the presence of armor in this game, a headshot can be the make or break between you winning a fight. Just do it. Speaking of going for headshots, you can zero the sights on every primary weapon in the game and give them a longer effective range. The default keybinds for this is page up and page down, but I personally recommend putting this on your mouse scroll wheel. Zeroing your weapons for longer range fights goes a long way on snipers in particular, and lets you score just some of the most disgusting long-range snipes possible. You can take this one step further, and if you mount a rangefinder to your sniper rifle and then use that reading to zero your scope effectively, then you will be able to snipe with absolute precision in this game into distances upwards of 1,000 meters. It's really quite a lot of fun. Tip number 24. Snipers will need to be manually rechambered after every shot. You do this by clicking the fire button again after firing a round. Eventually, you will unlock bolt attachments that will automate this process. Tip number 25. All scopes that fall into the long-range category will emit a scope glint when you aim down sights. If you want to snipe without emitting a scope glint, equip a medium-range optic instead. If you are sniping at distance and using a long-range optic, equip and deploy the MDX-201. This gadget fakes a scope glint and will help to draw snipers away from your position if you place this thing smartly. I would recommend placing the item down and then spacing yourself away from it to draw people's attention away from your position itself. Tip 27, getting back into the thick of it here a bit, listen out for footsteps. This is a chaotic game with a lot of players, a lot of audio happening, but footsteps can still be heard if you're paying attention, and can be the difference between you being sent to the Shadow Realm and turning on an opponent and turning them into Swiss cheese. Tip 28, communication is key in BattleBit, and there are 3 voice channels that you can use in-game to communicate with the players around you. The first is proximity chat, which can be heard by all players on each team in your proximity. The default keybind binding for this is V. The squad chat, which can be heard by all members of your squad no matter the distance. The default key binding is B. And the leadership chat, a channel which can be used by squad leaders on a team to communicate regarding objectives and plans to take the win. The default key binding for this is N. Tip 29, you can also ping the location, enemy player, or vehicle of where you're aiming by pressing your middle mouse button by default. This will be visible to your squad members. Tip number 30, pings on enemy vehicles will actually stick to them and track the vehicle for a certain period of time. Make sure you ping vehicles so that allies that can target them effectively can do so if you don't have the tools for the job. Tip 31, you can also ping enemies from the death camera. In addition, if you don't move your mouse after you die, your death camera will automatically pan to the player that killed you. It can be great for communicating to your teammates as to where your killer is. Tip number 32, if there's one thing that BattleBit rewards a lot, it's flanking. Sometimes it's just really worth taking a step back, taking stock of the battle lines, and at times even stepping away from the battle entirely to find a flank. It may lead to some downtime, you may need to spawn a little further back, but the payoff can be very worth it if you pull it off. Tip 33. In addition, if you're sort of hiding in a corner looking to trap somebody, patience can be key. More often than not, there's going to be more than one player coming around a corner, so holding off for a moment may save you from alerting a second player to your presence if you're being sneaky. Using footsteps to identify this will go a long way. Tip 34. To help you on your flanking adventures, you can vault most surfaces in the game. Typically, most things in the game that sit at around chest to eye height from your character can be vaulted. Jumping towards a vaultable surface and aiming at the top of the surface can actually even give you more leeway as to what you can vault at times. Keep that in mind. Tip 35. BattleBit may have fall damage, but you can actually use the vaulting system to break your fall if you happen to yeet off a long drop and you time it right. Of course, there's going to be a moment where you cross the point of no return when it comes to taking falling damage, but in some situations, vaulting at the right time can actually save your bacon. It takes some time to get the hang of, but is worth practicing as it lets you do some really cool stuff. Tip 36. While doing your cheeky flanks, always keep an eye out for claymores and anti-personnel mines. There's been many a time where I've been caught out by these cheeky suckers, and the only thing you can do is just be a tad more careful. Don't let your epic flank end too early because someone put a claymore down. Tip 37. Alright, so we've talked a bit so far about infantry combat, and it's certainly the bread and butter of BattleBit, but you're also going to see a lot of vehicles running around in the game as well. These range from ATVs, transport and armed jeeps, light watercraft, APCs, main battle tanks, light transport and attack helicopters, and large-scale transport helicopters. Tip 38, taking a moment to get a bit deeper with the vehicle mechanics, all vehicles that feature armaments will have specific ammo reserves that can only be resupplied by returning to base. If you run dry on ammo, get ready for a long trek back home. You can also repair your vehicles from home base as well if you don't have an engineer with a repair tool with you. Tip 39, most vehicle weaponry can be zoomed for multiple ranges as needed. This is done with your mouse scroll wheel accordingly. Tip 40, main battle tanks will have two shell choices to choose from when engaging targets: armor piercing, AP, or high explosive, HE. AP, as it sounds, is designed for engaging armored targets and has a much higher shell velocity than HE, while HE is better suited for engaging infantry thanks to a higher splash damage and for also dealing with structures. Just be prepared for a longer round travel time. Tip 41, at times you may see a small X appear on your HUD when using a vehicle weapon. This indicates that your round may hit an item in its path before reaching where your crosshair is located. This may be some, cover that you're hiding behind, terrain, or anything of the like. It's just something to keep in mind so you don't waste ammo unnecessarily. Tip 42. APCs and main battle tanks have directional damage multipliers depending on where you hit them from with AT weaponry. For example, hitting these vehicles in the rear or the sides will deal additional damage. Tip 43. Going airborne for a second, if you hit a helicopter's tail rotor with an RPG or a tank shell, the helicopter will fall into a tailspin before crashing into the ground. All players inside the helicopter will emerge concussed for a brief moment before coming to. If those players have taken damage before the crash landing, then they'll most likely die immediately. Tip 44. If you're piloting a helicopter, make sure to deploy your rappel rope so passengers can exit safely. Tip 45. On the flip side, as a passenger in a moving helicopter, don't jump out unless you see this message on your screen. There are no parachutes in the game, and you'd be better off hoping for a medic to catch you groundside on the landing if you get this wrong and jump out without the rappel rope deployed. Tip 46. If you're an engineer in a transport helicopter, you can repair it internally if it's under heavy fire. This is a must-have for any squad looking to run a helicopter gunship squad using the transport choppers. Tip 47. If you're a gunner in a helicopter, you can keep the minigun spooled up by holding your ADS button. This will keep you more readily available for the next gun run as needed. Tip 48. Also, if you take direct damage while driving a vehicle and start bleeding, you can begin bandaging while in a cockpit or in a gunner position to avoid bleeding out. Do this by holding your bandaging key as you normally would. Tip 49. Now obviously we need a way to deal with all of these vehicles. RPGs are available to the engineer class, or C4 is available to most other classes in the game, and these will be your best friends in engaging heavily armored vehicles. However, you can also shoot players with small arms fire directly out of lightly armored vehicles should an angle present itself. Tip number 50. A full health MBT will take 4 C4 sticks to destroy. Make sure you don't get this wrong because you don't want to miss out on the juicy kill if you get close enough. Tip 51. You may have noticed by now that there are multiple types of RPG in the game. Fragmentation, heat, and tandem. The fragmentation rounds are best effective against infantry and carry superb splash damage at the cost of having little to no armor penetration. The heat rounds serve as a good middle ground, sporting ample splash damage but good armor penetration as well. These are best for dealing with lighter vehicles or buildings and fortifications. The tandem round is the heaviest round of the bunch with terrible muzzle velocity, but this round will ruin any armor's day right quick. It's a real artillery piece, that's to be sure, but it's a lot of fun to use if you can get it right. Tip 52. As you unlock more of these RPG variants, you'll come across this monstrosity of a scope here. Believe it or not, this scope actually marks out the effective ranges for the fragmentation, heat, and tandem rounds respectively, and it actually tells you how high to aim for targets at longer distances. I've left a graphic on your screen right now that outlines the ranges, so feel free to pause the video here and take note. Tip number 53. All this talk about explosives and none about the game's destruction. What a segue. All building surfaces with a brick facade in this game can be destroyed with C4, heavy vehicle fire, RPGs, and sledgehammers. Use this to gain new entry points, firing angles, or just to yeetus deletus the cover away from enemy players. Further to that, a lot of buildings can collapse entirely if they take too much damage. Keep this in mind. Tip 54. As the game goes on, you may find a position you wish to fortify, or just try to replace some of the cover that's disappeared through just endless destruction. You can place fortifications down like sandbags and concrete walls by clicking and holding the middle mouse button. The support class can build these immediately, whereas other classes need to construct them over time by holding F on their skeleton. Tip 55. Similarly, you can use the middle mouse button to call in an ammo supply drop if you catch yourself running low on ammunition. It takes a while to land groundside normally, but if you look up and shoot the parachute, you can make it fall to the ground faster. Furthermore, if you're the leader of a squad, for clarification, you don't need to be playing the game's squad leader class to do this, you can actually use the same button to deploy a squad spawn beacon that your teammates can spawn on. It does have a loud audio signature and can be destroyed, so take care when placing this thing. Tip 57. In addition, when leading a squad, you can mark objectives for your squad to prioritize. This will tell your squad members where to go and will give all parties involved extra experience when objectives are taken or defended as per your orders. Tip 58. Playing on a night map, press the N key to activate your night vision goggles. It goes without saying, but these help a lot in the visibility department on these night maps. Tip 59. Cannot use most long range and medium range scopes during night engagements. So if you're running a loadout that typically carries such an optic, run a canted secondary or switch things out entirely. Tip number 60. Laser sights become visible with NVGs equipped, which means that you can be tracked directly back to your position if you're using it at night. If you opt to use a laser sight at night, take some consideration of this. It may be giving your position away. Tip 61. You can also use your laser sight at nighttime for point aiming while using NVGs. It's a nice CQC alternative if you're running around with a range optic at night as well. And finally, tip number 62, and sort of a bonus tip for the day, get creative with your gameplay. Yes, you can put C4 or proximity mines on drones and send them in there like little bomb drones. Yes, the suicide C4 is incredibly fun to play with in this game and you can do some dumb as hell stuff with it. And yes, you can strap C4 to an ATV or a Jeep and do some Jeep stuff. So once again, get creative and of course, have some fun. But whew, ladies and gentlemen, that is all of the tips and tricks I had for BattleBit Remastered as we go into the launch of the game. I'm sorry that it took me a little bit longer to get this video out than I would have liked, but let's just say I had a lot of tips to go through and a lot of gameplay to collect to show off what you could do in this game. But of course, guys, there's a lot of stuff that we can go into even more depth about. So get subscribed because we've got a lot of BattleBit informative content coming over the next few weeks and, well, going for the long run that I hope you guys will enjoy as well. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to backhand the like button as it does go a long way to supporting the channel. And as always, I recommend checking out my social media links down below to catch up on our live streams on Twitch and come join our community Discord. Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.